All right. So it is August 2023. My name is George Ferrari. I serve as CEO of Your Community Foundation. Let's Talks our 30 to 45-minute quick takes on issues in our mission-driven world. And we're very happy and excited when people join us to learn more about these topics. And we have with us today Briggs Seekins from Challenge Industries or Challenge Workforce Solutions. I can't have to get your name correct.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you'll be sharing information with us about employment pathways for community members who have barriers and challenges and are differently abled. Community Foundation is your community foundation and is a source of information about resources and opportunities to engage with the local community in a philanthropic way. We have some other folks joining us, and we'll get started in just a minute or so. Again, if you have questions, you can put those in the chat. And Gloria has shared a QR code in the chat. Is that right?
Yep,
Good.
sure did.
And information about our e-newsletters and site visits. And we have an interesting event coming up next week, April 15th. Nancy Masici is headlining that one for us with Jason Tripp, who is a professional advisor. This is for folks who are wanting to understand opportunities they might have to develop charitable goals as part of their overall financial planning. And that's tomorrow, next week, April 15th at noon. And that is also a Zoom webinar. So welcome everyone here.
Yeah, and if I could just add, George, that
Yes. Yep, good points. Thanks, Nancy. And some of you may not realize we hold a variety of different types of funds here at Community Foundation. So not just donor advised funds or unrestricted assets, but also funds created around a field of interest or an issue or a topic. Children and youth as an example. Women's funds are probably most well-known one. And we also have funds dedicated to specific organizations, whether that be the Lansing Library or CDRC or Hospicare. Those are also ways in which donors can plan with your professional advisors about how you want to support specific organizations. So why don't we get started? Welcome everyone who's here. Thank you for being with us. I have the pleasure of introducing Briggs Seekins from Challenge Industries. He's going to share with us a little bit. You have a PowerPoint ready to go, I think.
I do.
Great. Welcome.
All right, that looks like that's up. There's our picture. So the agenda for the meeting, I feel like this is probably a fairly general audience. So a little bit about Challenge history, who we serve, what we can do for employers, how employers can help us and sort of support our mission. And then just because there is, a lot of people know us through our business, and I don't really work, that's not really my field or my end of the agency, but I can talk a little bit about it and how it connects to what I do. I will also say rated G for general audiences. I try when I do any kind of presentation that's not to specifically people who do almost exactly what I do, not use acronyms. So I will not use any acronyms. I mean, my goal is to use no acronyms, but I've been in human services for so long that sometimes they slip out without me meaning to. If somebody has a specific question though in the Q&A that relates to one of the funders or that has an acronym, I'm happy to use them then, but I'm going to try to give a presentation that tells about what we do without getting in the weeds, basically. So brief history of Challenge. So Challenge was founded in 1968 by Robert Sproul Sr., who I'm guessing from our webpage, that must be Mr. Sproul. The original sheltered workshop served 13 people. And it was located within the Thurm facility itself. This history does make challenge, I think, kind of an interesting human service agency, particularly for the population that we work with. A lot of counties, an agency that does what we do may also be doing like across the board sort of residential supports for some of those same people, or day program supports. We really focus on vocational, which means that I don't know of any other agencies, honestly, that are quite like ours in the state as far as working with as many kind of different people with different barriers, but also for the focus of what we do. And of those original 13 people, so that said 13. I thought we had 8, but that may have been my own original 8 making that up. One of them actually in 2018, when we had our 50th anniversary, he was honored at the 50th anniversary, and then he retired that week. And he is still enjoying retirement. I saw him maybe 6 months ago, and one of our custodians said he saw him when he went on a trip to Alexander Bay with him. So that's somebody that we supported through 50 years of working, and now he's into retirement. So I feel like to understand the importance of sort of where disability services in general are in the culture and where we are as an agency, if you look at, say, 1968, so that is the beginning of what they would call, or it's sort of in the beginning era of the deinstitutionalization era. It was 72 is when Geraldo Rivera, he famously did an expose of Willowbrook, which was this notorious facility in New York City. I think
Yep.
it's part of Staten Island Community College now. We're part of, and there's actually a nice park. If I ever went to Staten Island, which I don't know I would do, I would probably go look and see like the plaque and stuff there. And there were a lot of agencies, there were a lot of institutions like that around the country. That's the one that got famous. I mean, we had them within the region, and they were basically warehouses where they sent people. And it was a pretty bleak situation. So there's a lot of things we've changed over the years, but things got quite a bit better when we deinstitutionalized. So for many years, challenge was associated, if people have lived in the community, they will probably remember our pink or salmon, maybe would be the right word for the color of our building that was at the bottom of East State Street across from Gateway, where the Gateway Commons sort of is. It's a big, I think it's like, it's next to the Argos there, but I think that building now is housing and maybe some apartment buildings. So that really was a big part of our identity, that building, for quite a while. I worked there during the first or the last few years that we had it. So in an historical perspective, again, we have about the last decade or so of the year, we've been under, like, just as there was the deinstitutionalization, we have had the workshop transformation or the transition where the idea of people just going and working in a workshop where they were away from really other workers. It was definitely an improvement of people being institutionalized. If they had like it was definitely, I mean, I started out working in the workshop, and it was fun. I don't feel like it was probably as rewarding as what some other possibilities we facilitate nowadays. Nowadays, everything we do, we have no facility that we operate. We have administrative offices, but we don't own any building. And everything we do is in a sort of community setting. So we have, and that when I talk about like what we need from community partners, that's a part of it. I believe this one picture is from, I believe that he's up at the Equine Center, and then this is the Finger Lakes Toy Library out at the mall. Some people may be familiar with. We go in regularly and we kind of work there. These are our pre-vote programs. They are to get people ready to work competitively in the community. So around this time during this 10 years, I almost use an acronym. So I'll just say New York State changed the way they incentivize agencies like ours to support people. And they stopped, they basically made it impossible for us to operate a facility because they wouldn't give us, they won't fund having a building. Like we could have it if we could make up a business that would cover that. But really, when we did business contracts in the work center, we weren't profitable in those businesses. It was subsidized by our funding. We get funded now to get people in the community and to get them working competitively. Which, there was a little bit during this process, like statewide, people talking about, well, the state's cutting funding. They didn't really cut funding. I would argue that it may have, there were some rates got fixed in a bad way for years. There were no COLA adjustments. Like throughout New York State, but they changed the incentives for what they wanted an agency to do so that we will be bringing people, integrating them into the community, getting them work, doing competitive work in the community. So who does Challenge serve? So first of all, there isn't a typical person that Challenge serves. We work with people, we have programs where we have students in school and we're helping them with providing transition services, career exploration services, maybe a first support for a first intern. We work with folks that are, just left school all the way through up and through to retirement. And sometimes our programming isn't just based, we've, especially the last few years, as some of our, population, as it continues to age, it's been that, we use it to support meaningful activities into retirement, like that transition into retirement. So we really do, work with folks throughout their professional career life, the people we work. How does somebody receive services from Challenge? So in order to enroll, you do have to qualify for funding through one of the government agencies that fund our services. So in some cases, you would have to be referred directly from an agency. And I will often, I help people apply to that agency so that they can come back to work with us. Other times people contact us and it's just a matter of me or one of my managers getting connected with, like, say, their case manager to figure out, okay, this person definitely qualifies to be in services with Challenge, so let's get them enrolled. But it's not, occasionally people will contact me. They have somebody that really probably does honestly need help. They have a barrier, but it's not as simple as usually just enrolling them. Sometimes a couple questions and I'm like, oh yeah, we can get this person next week enrolled. Sometimes it's going to be a longer process. I am happy to take any questions though. If people know somebody that's a young person or a person with some disabilities or any sort of barrier and you're not sure where to start, I'm always happy to talk to people about. I have a pretty good idea of other vocational programs that are available throughout the county just because of the kind of meetings I'm in and the work we do. I spent some time yesterday referring a person who I don't believe will probably be in services for us, though, to a really good manufacturing training program that's kind of new in the community. So I am still, even though not everybody qualifies for Challenge services, if you have somebody, a family member, anybody, you're not sure where to start. My role, Director of Employment Vocational Services at Challenge, that should be a position where that person is in the community, like able to answer these kind of questions, and help somebody get in this direction. So
Great.
What kind of relationships do we have with employers? This is an important one that we try to always do is thorough of a job up front, talking to employers about explaining this. It can be confusing because it can, depending on what program somebody we're working with in that can have a lot to do with whether or not, what kind of supports we give them. But in the most general terms, this is an important term, I feel like, for us. Our staff are a reasonable workplace accommodation. So we're not working for the employer, like we don't have a contract with the employer, like we don't sign anything with the employer. And we are really ultimately there for things like taking a lead role in the training process, facilitating communication with supervisors or coworkers. A lot of folks we work with, they may work for an employer that has the way HR is handled is you get emails like notifying you when you need to get updated on a training. So like something our staff might do is review that with that person, like, and make sure like, oh, okay, because they may know they got the email, or if the person can't do email, we may actually be the one who gets those emails to facilitate for them. So, and we are trained, our staff are trained to break down jobs, to sort of like simplify instructions so that we can facilitate the training process for, somebody that might need more training than an employer can reasonably do, themselves when they bring a new employee in. So we are, though, it is our goal that we be successful with the person in the job. I feel we really, overall, we really strive. We have good relationships with our employers based on how often in some of our programs our staff are there coaching for a very long time on site. So they almost become like, from the point of view of the staff at the place, almost like they're part of the team for, for at least maybe 6 months or 8 months. Our staff get invited to like, the holiday parties at businesses and things like that often. So even though we definitely first and foremost work for the employee, we don't want to have relationships with employers that it's not going to be a good relationship anyway. So we try to make that very much a partnership relationship. So other things that we need in the community are training locations. So what I mean by this is, as I said, we do everything in the community. We sometimes have very specific short-term assessments. We also have some longer ongoing, like, work training assessments. These are really monitored by the Department of Labor ultimately, and how long somebody can be in a vocational program and do unpaid training or assessments in the community. It's limited. Like, it's got to be, and we have like some, significant documentation to show, well, this person's making progress in this way, where they're moving towards their goal. That's why we're doing that. But it does mean that ultimately we personally don't use the word volunteer, even though a lot of agencies we work with, we do kind of work through their volunteer program to set up these relationships. And the only thing we always need to make clear is that, like, it needs to be understood that, like, we're not there to solve a staff problem. And that is potentially a bigger, if the Department of Labor came in and reviewed some of these and we're like, well, this business is just using a pre-vote crew from Challenge to fill staffing needs, and that's all that's going on there, the Department of Labor would maybe take all those hours that we sent somebody there and say, you gotta pay those people minimum. So it would be a bigger problem potentially for the people that have the workers in there than, or more expensive for them than it would be for us. It would definitely be a problem for us. That being said, one of the things we are training people on is recognizing how jobs are completed. So all of these kind of things are done with a staff who is on site working with our folks and instructing and teaching our clients in our program. And so one of the things that's very important is like completing the job, right? So we do, if we say we're going to get a mailing out for you, like one where, we will get the mailing out. but there's no pressure on our individual people that like, you got to do 30 envelopes this hour to keep this position. Like it's a training position. And then real quick, before we go to Q&A, our business operations. So Challenge has always pretty much had social enterprise businesses. These employees may or may not hire people that are in services that I oversee. So I think a traditional model for those kind of businesses has been like, you start a business so you can employ your clients. We don't do that. That's not like, we come up with businesses that we think are a good business that is going to provide revenue. We do tend to go into fields that, you know, maybe people that we work with are gonna do well in. But it's a separate issue. So we have right now, you know, we have 3 pretty good contracts at Cornell in the dish rooms, and we have people in our services that work in those contracts. But I'm pretty sure we have more people that we support in Cornell that just work for Cornell at this point. I mean, I would have to check. It's probably kind of close. I mean, that would not have probably been the case 10 years ago, but just, it could be partly too because of the kind of community it is. There's a lot of jobs. Like, we don't need to make up a business that doesn't make business sense just to hire people to work for us and have jobs for them. Like, we would never start a business so that we can put people working there and then bill for supporting them working in this business. Like, that business needs to make money on its own. And then hopefully it's got some opportunities for some people we work with. And then just since I brought up businesses real quick, I am going to give one business plug, even though it's not mine. This is that's not a real dog, but it kind of looks like one, I think. I don't know if you can tell. It looks, in the picture, it looks kind of like a little pocket purse dog. So this was called Shelter Pups. This was, somebody else owned this company in Challenge. I mean, in Ithaca. Challenge purchased it maybe a couple of years ago. So if you have a beloved pet or a family member as a pet that you want to get, I would say it's a pretty unique business. And they are, I got one for my mom for her pug. I don't think they were able to make unfortunately hers quite as chubby as the pug, but I've seen other ones where the side-by-side picture practically looks like, you know, a real cat or a real dog. So it's a fun little business that we have. It's not a big employer right now, but we have one very, very talented artist that was in our services. I thought would be hard to figure out where she could work, and they pretty much grabbed her right away. So so that it got a little over 20, maybe a couple minutes over 20 minutes, but that will wrap up the presentation. So I'm happy to take the Q&A now. And I guess I'll stop sharing though.
Thank you very much, Briggs. Very, very good information.
Great information. Thank you, Briggs. For those that came in a little later, we do have a few links posted to the chat about ways to connect with us. Ahead of time, there were some questions that were submitted with registrations, and I will just read through a couple of the questions. They may have been answered, but Briggs, if you can
Sure.
make it a more direct answer for those who asked the question. And then if you could please go ahead, and if you have additional questions, write that in the chat, and then we will get to those as well. So the first question is, what is necessary for small and medium-sized employers to successfully design positions for people with disabilities? Second part is, what resources are available, especially for businesses without their own HR staff?
So the first one, so I think that we probably, I would say for number of employers, probably more of them are smaller employers. Of course, like a bigger employer like a Wegmans or Cornell is going to have more people employed at it. But we have a lot of small employers. We customizing a job, a lot of times a job developer we have will be very good at that. So I see Lily Rhodes is So Lily Rhodes is one of our job developers, and she actually goes to these, I believe, every other month. So somebody like Lily would, the way to start that would be to contact me and then talk to Lily or another one of our staff or job developers, or I might, depend on, how busy everybody is, I might come visit your business and see, or if it's a business I'm kind of familiar with myself. So we might just talk to you about like what your staffing needs are. A lot of times we might help you figure out like, okay, we have somebody who could definitely do these parts of the job. If you had somebody come in and do these parts of the job for like 2 or 3 hours, every day or every other day or something like that, how much would that be worth it to free up your staff time for another end? So a lot of times those are very, very particular conversations that we have to have with somebody. So we are always, if you have staffing needs, I say that we're always a good source. Like I'm a good person to call or to contact Challenge. We're not a staffing agency though. So we don't, and I don't know what staffing agencies have available for a roster at this point either, but we're not so we don't necessarily have somebody that's going to be ready or it's going to fit what you need. I would say more often our people we're working with, definitely much more often, we are working with people that are really looking to at least initially be part-time, in part because of managing benefits, sometimes just because of the level of experience they have working, that's going to be all they're going to, or maybe the nature of their disability, that's all they're going to be able to handle anyway. So that's a factor too, if you're looking. We do with DSS, we run some programs where we have people that might be looking for full-time. In some of our Department of Social Services, we're in the Q&A, so there's my first acronym. So we have some people that come through that program that are in their services, and some of those folks are definitely looking to work full-time. So we're always worth contacting. We may or may not be a quick solution, but it can be a good, at some point, if once we know you're interested in working with us, somebody like Lily will be coming back to see you periodically too and see what's going, do you have more openings? Do you have something that fits now? Because our roster, who we're working with changes quite a bit too. And then as far as HR, I mean, we work with agencies or businesses that don't have any specific HR. A big part of what we do is help navigate that part. Like we would show up and help onboard somebody, or we will spend like 4 hours of the mandatory New York State trainings that we have now for HR. I mean, we have them at our agency, but that's a pretty common thing for our staff to do with somebody that they got hired if the person needs it. If there's going to be a question and if there's a test at the end, we might be there to help them, understand what the questions were as they're doing it. Definitely I would, not having an HR wouldn't be, I mean, it's harder for us to work with like a big HR. Like Lily probably knows more about Cornell HR than anybody that doesn't work for Cornell. And honestly, probably more than a good number of the people that work for Cornell, because it's so complicated, the HR, just because of what an enormous institution and the number of employees and the number of departments. But any of the bigger employers can be like that. So it's almost easier for us to sometimes work with a smaller, where you're talking to the one-stop person. They're the hiring manager. They're going to be the supervisor. Like that's a much easier relationship to start right away than someplace where we're going to have to, here's this shift supervisor, here's these. So that definitely is not, shouldn't be a bear, make somebody hesitate to try to work with us.
Thanks, Bryce. So in the, I'm going to keep going with the questions, but in the interest of time, if anyone needs to hop off at 12:30, please feel free to do so. And then if you want to come back to listen to the remaining questions, then you can go into our website. The links are on the chat.
And I will say, if you don't get a question answered, or you have like more follow-up or a more in-depth conversation, I mean, I'm pretty easy to contact, so you can get a hold of me through the contact information.
And if you do need to leave now, we'd love you to come back for our next Let's Talk, which is happening September 5th. That's the day after Labor Day. And it's help with grant writing. So I'm putting a link in the chat for that.
Perfect. All right, the next question is, we are interested to know if you can send us volunteers and or interns, but I'm gonna change that up a little bit and say, or ask, what does the process look like? Let's say I'm an organization that wants to see if we are eligible. What are the steps to getting a group to come out to our organization?
So to work with like one of our pre-vote groups and to be a pre-vote training site, the first step would be to just contact me. And then I would probably turn you over to our pre-vocational manager though, Chris, pretty quickly. Just because he schedules that. We're always, it's important to us to be going to different places. I mean, really the fundamental most important part of that program is to just go and be in different community locations so that folks in that program are getting a lot of different community experience to prepare to go into the program where we try to get them a job. Now, interns are a little bit different thing. And if you were like, we have, through some of our funders, we have some time limited interns, which are, we have that are subsidized. We have one program that we call interns, but the goal is that you would hire them eventually. So it's really always a conversation that would have to be somewhat individualized, but it always would start by just get in contact with us. Like we don't have any application. It's very informal. I will contact you right away. If you don't hear from me a couple of days, it could mean that somehow it got lost. So get a hold of me again. I usually answer everything. If you don't get I'm out of the office until such and such a date, I usually will answer it within about at least 48 hours and probably sooner if it relates to getting somebody a job. So.
Perfect. The next question is, how do you work with adults with limited or little English?
So like an ESL, that would be like an ESL issue. So we don't work with like, say, people that are new Americans. Like we don't have, and honestly, I feel like that right now in the community, there's not a lot, like I don't know of a lot of good vocational support for the refugee population that's resettling here, other than just what's available to general workers. Some of the programs we're in, we do have to, there's not as good of translation services as I would like for things like that. We usually have to hobble something together, unfortunately, when we need. The most common would be either ESL or probably Spanish would be, the two most common where we've had to work with the rest of the team of that person to get a translator. That's kind of been like, either we hire somebody for that hour, like a service, or we have a staff, luckily, that's, we've often had staff that are fluent in either ESL or Spanish or another foreign language. Those have been though the most common. We had a grant many years ago where we actually had a ESL, like we hired a staff that was ESL certified. And at that time we had there were a lot of people moving into the community from well, it's not called the country in Southeast Asia that they changed the name. The name
Myanmar.
Myanmar, yes.
Called Burma, formerly known as Burma.
Yeah. And we had in our business, like one of our we had a few people that worked with us at that point too. And worked with us while they were getting, some of them got their full citizenship while they worked with us. But it's kind of like piecemeal what we would do. And in general, I don't feel like there's enough resources available for that. I would guess if they're not as readily available for vocational, I would guess for other services. I know hospitals tend to have on-call people to translate and things like
I
that.
did put a link in the chat for Cornell's translator interpreter program. They're very good.
Yeah,
and they are
okay, that's
available,
useful
yeah.
to know, yeah.
All right, so we have two more questions, one from Ian and one from Catherine, who both, I think, hopped off. So the first one, many employers in the area continue to struggle with staffing. Has this led to any new opportunities and partnerships from previous resistant employers?
Well, it definitely, I don't know if I can think of like an example where somebody we couldn't work with before and now they're more open, but in general, employers are needing, there definitely are employers that were not, didn't want to hire part-time people. That now are like, yeah, we need, I mean, including us. I mean, traditionally we didn't want to, and I, in certain situations, I'm happy to have a part-time, professional staff working for us. But that definitely is the big one. Employers are more flexible. I can't say that for sure, but they still have specific needs that we can't always meet. So I would say the staffing shortage has made it easier to place people, to get people working. I mean, we almost run into problems where folks get themselves hired for a job that they might be a little bit tougher than what they, on their own. They like go out on their own and they're shopping somewhere and somebody's like, hey, you want a job? And they're like, yeah, I do. And then they're like, hey, I got a job. And we're like, oh, what did you get a job doing? And then they explain it to us. We're like, can you do that? And they're like, well, I think, but then we have to go back and kind of do it. Because people want to people need workers right now. There's no question about it. So I would say that it's easier right now to probably job develop than it has been most of the time in the last 15 to 20 years. But that could be too, just because we've been doing it so long that at this point we have pretty good systems for doing it, even as we get staff coming and going over the years. So, I mean, we're pretty well known. I think we get called at least as much as Workforce New York if somebody's looking for a worker. So, and Workforce New York probably sees more workers, but.
Thanks. Thank you, Briggs. And last question, for someone who's trying to figure out their work interest, do you have internship opportunities with employers?
So yes, if they're qualified, so in particular, if say like a transition student, age student, and I will use one acronym now, it's called Access VR, which stands for Adult Continuing Career Educational Services / Vocational Rehabilitation. But that's a fairly well-known for, especially like if you're a student that's around the age of your ending school. For that, we work with, we can work with people, and even people out of school, we get some specific references, say to career exploration. We might get something that's called a work-based learning experience authorized, which with that program, that's exactly what we do. We set them up, their wages are subsidized. They actually go on challenge payroll. And then we handle the payroll part, but they go and they're supposed to, really work. Like there might be some coaching from our staff, but they're also supposed to get in there. They're supposed to work. They're not supposed to be disruptive, but they are in a learning experience. But also like, hopefully they're doing some work, that, part of the learning is them doing some things that the business does get some benefit out of, just indirectly. It's got to be indirect benefit, but and that's a good way for people to sort of explore that program. They can get up to sometimes 320 hours of work. So if you're talking of like 10, 15, 20 hours of part-time work over a week work, that can stretch out with a couple of different, maybe 2 or 3 experiences trying to do that. And then in other programs, we just do general career exploration. We also, we're not trying to get somebody employed and that's where they stay. So we do try to focus on people going into entry-level jobs, because that's where everybody has to work when they start working, is in, entry-level jobs. But I've built into like, say, like what we do when we review caseloads. like twice a year. I build in that, like, we need to be reviewing with people, like, what do you want to do? Like, force them to do a little career exploration. Like, you like your job now, let's look up your job on the Department of Labor website and, you know, highlight the skills you use there and then see what other jobs use that skills. Would you like to do a job like that? So we try to have our services, especially for people that want that, and there's, you know, nobody should be going in, well, I don't want to say nobody, but most people in today's world shouldn't be going into the job they're going to have the rest of their life when they're, say, like 21 or 22. It's not, most of the time, it's not going to be possible. If that's what works out, that's okay. I mean, I do know a few people like that have worked at a place in the community since like 1987. And that is kind of nice. The guy's like an institution at that business. Like, he's like the mayor of that business, you know. That's, you know, I was a junior in high school and look at me now when that, and he was like, I think the same age, but you know, there's been people that have been going to that business and they've grown up and now they have kids that are like in middle school coming in, and there's the guy that, you know, they knew. So that is a nice thing, but that's not what's going to be that's not going to be the work life of most people we support. So we do upfront exploration because some people really don't even know where to begin on that. But we try to make sure that's a piece of what we're going to do for folks, you know, forever, you know, even if they don't think they want it, we're going to make them think about whether or not they want it. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Briggs, so much. Thank you for joining
You
us.
bet.
this
Thanks for having
afternoon.
me.
And thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for your questions, and thank you to everyone who was watching this recording. A couple of things before we go. Briggs, his email is in the chat. It's briggs@aboutchallenge.org. Also in the chat is our QR code. It's a link for ways to engage with us at the Community Foundation. And my email is on there as well, gcoicou@cftompkins.org. If you have any ideas for Let's Talk program for next year, please send me an email, and we can discuss it for next year. Our next Let's Talk, George also included that link in the chat, is our grants.
September 5th.
September 5th, yep. Help with grant writing in September. Please feel free to register for that as well. So we will
Charitable
close
gift
up.
planning next week. Yep.
Yep, well,
We always got something going on here.
Always something going on.
We're
I'll have
always-
George
yeah.
close it up. George, close us up.
Thank you all. Thanks, Gloria, for putting this together.
All right, everyone have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.